My brother won the Architect of the Year award for a building I designed from the ground up. He was wearing a $1,000 suit, smiling for the cameras and accepting a trophy with his name engraved on it. I was sitting at table 7 in a dress I bought on sale, watching the whole thing on a giant screen. But I wasn't clapping. I wasn't crying. I was opening my laptop. As he started his acceptance speech, thanking our parents for instilling in him a vision for the future, I clicked publish. 17 years of my work, every blueprint, every sketch, every late-night revision for every project he ever took credit for, went live on a website I'd been building for 6 months. By the time he said, "I couldn't have done it without my family," the first phone in the room buzzed with a notification, then another, and another. His empire, built on my silence, was about to become a ghost story. And I was the one holding the flashlight. The air in the grand ballroom of the Astoria Hotel tasted like money and floral arrangements. You know the smell. A mix of expensive perfume, seared scallops, and the faint metallic tang of ambition. Hundreds of people, all dressed in elegant black and shimmering silver, were there for the National Architecture Guild Awards. It was the Oscars for people who use words like brise-soleil and fenestration in casual conversation. Our family's firm, Vance Architecture, had its own table right near the front. Not the front, but close enough to signal, "We matter." My father, Robert Vance, sat at the head of the table, his posture perfect, his salt and pepper hair looking exactly as it did in his professional headshot. He had the kind of calm, authoritative presence that made people automatically trust him with their millions. Beside him, my mother, Eleanor, was a vision of curated grace. She wore a silk gown the color of champagne, and a smile that never faltered, even when she was subtly correcting the waiter on the proper placement of a wineglass. She was the firm's silent partner, the one who managed the social capital, ensuring the Vance name was always associated with class and impeccable taste. And then there was Leo, my older brother. He was the sun our family orbited around. Tonight, he was radiant, practically vibrating with a golden boy energy that was impossible to ignore. He was nominated for the night's biggest prize, Architect of the Year, for his work on the Helios building. He laughed easily, charmed the other nominees who stopped by our table, and accepted congratulations with a practiced, humble shrug that said, "Oh, this old thing. I just happened to dream up the most innovative commercial skyscraper of the decade. And me. I'm Clara. I was there too. I'm the head of conceptual design at Vance Architecture. It's a title that sounds important, doesn't it? It was designed to. In reality, it meant I worked in a quiet corner office with a powerful computer and sound-dampening walls. I didn't go to the client meetings. I didn't do the press interviews. I didn't stand on construction sites in a hard hat for photo ops. I just designed. I was the ghost in the machine. The Helios building, the one that had the entire industry buzzing, didn't come from Leo's vision. It came from my hard drive, from my sleepless nights, from 1,000 sketches I made with a charcoal pencil until my fingers were black. He'd seen the final rendering and said, "Yeah, that's it, that's the one." That was the extent of his design contribution. Sitting there, I felt like a foreign exchange student at a family reunion. I looked the part. I had the right last name, but I didn't speak the same language. The language of my family was one of unspoken rules. Rule number 1, Leo is the star. Rule number 2, Clara is the support system. Rule number 3, we do not talk about rules 1 and 2. My entire life had been a masterclass in abiding by these rules. I'd learned to swallow my own ambitions, to shrink my own accomplishments, to hand over my best ideas on a silver platter and smile as Leo presented them as his own. I did it for the sake of peace, for the sake of the family, for the business my father had poured his life into. I told myself it was a team effort, that my contribution was valued, even if it wasn't seen. I told myself this lie so many times that I almost started to believe it. But for the last 6 months, something had shifted. The Helios building was different. It wasn't just another project. It was my soul rendered in steel and glass. It was the culmination of everything I knew, everything I had ever dreamed of creating. And watching Leo soak up the adoration for it, watching my parents gaze at him with a pride they never once directed at me, felt like swallowing shards of glass. The injustice wasn't a dull ache anymore. It was a physical, sharp, and unbearable pain. The tension at the table was all mine. To everyone else, this was a celebration. My father was telling an anecdote about a difficult client Leo had won over. My mother was nodding, adding, "Leo just has a way with people. He gets them to see the bigger picture." They spoke about him like he was a force of nature, a singular genius. They spoke about my work as the firm's output. Every congratulatory handshake for Leo felt like a slap to my face. Every time someone said, "Your son is a visionary, Robert," a knot tightened in my stomach. They were all celebrating a fiction, a carefully constructed narrative I had helped write with my own silence. I kept my expression neutral, sipping my water, offering a small, tight smile when anyone looked my way. Inside, a silent scream was building. It was the scream of every idea I'd ever had that was introduced in a meeting with the words, "So, I had a thought," coming from Leo's mouth. It was the frustration of seeing my designs in magazines with his name in the byline. Tonight, the nomination felt like the final erasure. If he won, the lie would be permanently cemented in history. The Helios building would forever be his legacy, and I would be nothing more than a footnote in my own life story. The pressure was immense. It was the weight of a lifetime of being told, in 1,000 quiet ways, to stay in the background, to be the foundation so my brother could be the skyscraper. But foundations crack. Then it happened. The presenter, a famous older architect I'd admired my whole life, walked to the podium. And now, for the award for Architect of the Year. A drumroll played softly. A montage of the nominee's work flashed on the giant screens. The Miller Residence, the Coastal Arts Center, the Chen Tower, and finally, the Helios building. My building. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. I saw my sketches, my 3D models, my lighting studies, all presented under a giant, smiling picture of Leo. My mother reached over and squeezed my hand. "Isn't it wonderful, sweetie? All of this for our family." She thought she was comforting me, sharing in the joy. She had no idea her touch felt like a branding iron. "And the winner is," the presenter tore open the envelope, A theatrical pause. "Leo Vance for the Helios building!" The room erupted in applause. Our table shot to their feet, my father letting out a proud, booming laugh, my mother dabbing a tear from the corner of her eye. Leo hugged them both, his face a mask of shocked, humble delight. He looked over at me, still sitting, and gave me a wink. It was a tiny, conspiratorial gesture. A gesture that said, "Look what we did." Not, "Look what you did." Not, "Thank you." But we. And in that one single moment, 17 years of suppressed rage crystallized into something cold, hard, and perfectly clear. This wasn't a team. This was a theft. A long, slow, polite theft that I had enabled. He kissed my mother's cheek, shook my father's hand, and started the walk to the stage. He moved through the crowd like a prince, shaking hands, accepting pats on the back. The spotlight followed him. The cameras flashed. He was the hero of the story. But heroes and villains are just a matter of perspective. As he climbed the steps to the stage, I didn't watch him. I looked down. My hands were perfectly steady. I reached into my clutch, pulled out my slim silver laptop, and placed it on the table. The white tablecloth was pristine. The laptop looked like a surgical instrument. My father, momentarily distracted from his son's glory, glanced at me, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. "Clara, what are you doing?" I didn't answer him. I opened the lid. The screen glowed, illuminating a web page I had designed myself. It was stark white, with a single line of black text at the top. The Architecture of Clara Vance, a private portfolio. Below it was a button, a simple red button that said, "Publish." I had spent the last 6 months compiling everything. Every project file, every initial sketch with my signature and date stamp in the corner, every email chain where I had sent Leo the final concepts, and he had replied, "Perfect. I'll present these tomorrow." I had scanned pages from my private sketchbooks, recorded screen capture videos of my design process, and even included the metadata from the original files, which showed me as the author and creator. I had built an irrefutable digital monument to my own work, a silent archive of the truth. Leo was at the podium now. He tapped the microphone. The room fell silent. "Wow," he began, his voice thick with emotion. I am truly speechless. To be recognized for this project, the Helios building, is the honor of a lifetime." My mother was looking at him, her face a perfect portrait of maternal adoration. My father had his arm around her. They were so lost in his moment, they didn't see mine. "I have to thank my father, Robert Vance," Leo continued. "A titan of the industry who taught me everything I know." My finger hovered over the trackpad. I could hear my own breathing, slow and even. It was the calmest I had felt in years. "I have to thank my mother, Eleanor, whose unwavering support has been my rock." He paused, looking out over the crowd, over our table. He was searching for my eyes. He found them. He smiled that charming, brilliant smile. "And I couldn't have done it without my family, my team at Vance Architecture. This award isn't just for me. It's for all of us." That was it. That was the line. The all-encompassing us that was designed to include me while simultaneously erasing me completely. My finger moved. The cursor, a tiny black arrow, rested over the red button. With a quiet, definitive click, I pressed it. A loading bar appeared. 10%, 40%, 80%, 100%. Published. A small green checkmark confirmed it. At the same time, an automated script I'd written sent out an email with the link to a curated list of over 500 people. Every major architecture critic, every industry journalist on my list, every professor from my university, every client of Vance Architecture, and every single employee at the firm. The subject line was simple. A correction regarding the work of Vance Architecture. Across the room, a man at another table glanced down at his phone. A frown. He discreetly nudged his colleague. Then a woman 2 tables away did the same. A low murmur started, a ripple in the fabric of the celebratory silence. It was quiet at first, but it was growing. My father noticed it. His smile tightened. He looked from the whispering guests back to me, at my open laptop. The color drained from his face. Leo was still talking, but his voice was starting to sound distant, like a radio playing in another room. The real story was no longer on the stage. It was spreading through the ether from phone to phone, a digital wildfire. And I had just struck the match. This wasn't a sudden, impulsive act of rebellion. It was a slow burn that had started when I was a child. To understand why I pressed that button, you have to understand the house I grew up in. Not the physical house, which was a beautiful minimalist structure my father had designed, full of clean lines and cold surfaces, but the emotional architecture of my family. It was a structure built on a simple, unshakable blueprint. Leo was the prodigy, and I was the caretaker of his genius. It started with small things. When I was 8 and Leo was 10, our school held a drawing contest. I spent a week meticulously sketching a detailed fantasy castle with soaring towers and intricate bridgework. I was proud of it. The night before it was due, Leo, who had forgotten the assignment entirely, saw it on the kitchen table. He panicked. My mother walked in and saw the look on his face. She turned to me, her voice soft and reasonable. "Clara, honey, you're so good at drawing. You could draw another one in an hour. Leo's been so busy with soccer practice. Why don't you let him use this one? It's important for him to feel successful." She wasn't being cruel. In her mind, she was being practical. She was maintaining the family's equilibrium. Leo's confidence was a fragile, precious thing that needed to be protected at all costs. Mine was assumed. I remember the hot shame, the feeling of my work being treated like a disposable commodity. But I said nothing. I stayed up late and drew a lesser castle, a simple one, and turned it in. Leo submitted my masterpiece. He won first prize. At the awards assembly, he stood on stage holding a blue ribbon, and my parents beamed. They told everyone how he had a natural gift for perspective. They bought him a professional set of drafting pencils to nurture his talent. They bought me a new eraser. That single incident became the blueprint for our entire lives. In high school, I'd solve the complex physics problems, and he'd copy my homework on the bus, telling me, "You just get it, Clara. I need to see the process." When he struggled with his college application essays, I stayed up with him, rephrasing his clumsy sentences, shaping his mediocre ideas into a compelling narrative about his passion for structure and form. He got into a prestigious architecture program. I went to a state school, partly because we were told it was more financially sensible, and partly because, as my father said, Leo needs the bigger stage. You've always been more of a behind-the-scenes person anyway. You thrive there. They didn't see it as theft. They saw it as synergy. They weren't malicious. They were blind. Blinded by their adoration for their son and by the roles they had assigned us from birth. Leo wasn't just the golden child. He was the family brand. And my job was to polish the brand. When we started Vance Architecture after graduation, it was supposed to be a partnership. The Vance siblings, we joked. My father provided the seed money and his name. Leo would be the face, the rainmaker. I would be the lead designer. It felt right for a while. In the early days, we were a team. We'd argue over blueprints, celebrate small victories with cheap pizza, and dream about the future. But the old pattern was too deeply ingrained. The first big project we landed was the Miller residence. I poured my heart into it. I designed a cantilevered living room that seemed to float over a cliffside, with glass walls that captured the sunrise. It was a complex, beautiful design. Leo loved it. But when we went to the presentation, he did all the talking. He presented my sketches as his own thought process. I woke up one morning with this image in my head. He told the clients, his voice full of passion. A house that didn't just sit on the landscape, but conversed with it. I sat beside him, silent, my folder of notes and structural calculations untouched. When the clients raved about the visionary concept, they raved to him. My father clapped Leo on the back and said, "That's my boy." I tried to speak up. Once, after the Miller project was featured in a design magazine with Leo's name as the sole architect, I went into my father's office. I closed the door. "Dad," I started, my voice shaking slightly. "I designed the Miller house, every line of it. It's not fair that Leo is getting all the credit." My father leaned back in his leather chair and steepled his fingers. He looked at me not with anger, but with a kind of weary disappointment. "Clara," he said calmly, "what is the goal here? To build a world-class firm? Or to count who gets credit for what? Leo is the front man. That's his strength. You're the engine. That's yours. A band doesn't put the drummer on the cover of the album. It's not personal. It's business. It's about what works. This works. Don't be selfish. Don't rock the boat. Don't rock the boat." That phrase became my cage. To argue for my own work was to be selfish. To ask for recognition was to be a bad team player. I was being gaslit so expertly, so lovingly, that I started to believe it myself. Maybe he was right. Maybe this was just how the world worked. So I retreated further into my work. I became the firm's secret weapon. Project after project flowed from my desk. The Lakeside Pavilion, the corporate headquarters for a tech giant, a string of boutique hotels. Each one was hailed as a triumph of Leo Vance's singular vision. And with each triumph, a small piece of me died. I was becoming a ghost in my own life, haunting the hallways of the firm I helped build, watching my own legacy be attributed to someone else. The Helios building was supposed to be my breaking point. I had promised myself that this one would be different. But when Leo was nominated, and my family's reaction was the same chorus of praise for him, I realized nothing would ever be different. Unless I made it different. The website wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of survival. It was the only way to prove I existed. The buzz in the ballroom was growing louder now. It had morphed from a murmur to a distinct agitated hum. People weren't just whispering. They were openly staring at our table. Leo, still on stage, had faltered in his speech. He could feel the shift in the room's energy. His confident smile wavered as he saw dozens of illuminated phone screens tilted towards him, not in adoration, but in scrutiny. He looked back at our table, his eyes wide with confusion, and saw my open laptop. He saw my father's ashen face. He saw my mother frantically whispering, "Robert, what's happening?" He mumbled a hasty "thank you" into the microphone and practically ran off the stage, clutching the heavy gold trophy like a shield. He strode toward our table, his face a thundercloud of confusion and anger. The applause for him had died prematurely, replaced by the electric tension of a brewing scandal. "What the hell did you do?" he hissed, his voice low and venomous as he reached our table. He didn't look at me. He looked at our father. He still couldn't conceive that I was the one capable of such an insurrection. My father, for the first time in his life, looked utterly lost. He just stared at my screen, at the bold title, "The Architecture of Clara Vance." I was the one who answered. I closed the laptop with a quiet, final snap. "I published my portfolio," I said, my voice even. It didn't even tremble. "My actual portfolio." Leo's head snapped towards me. The condescending wink from minutes before was gone, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated shock, as if the furniture had started talking. "You! What are you talking about?" "The Helios building," I said, meeting his gaze directly. "The Lakeside Pavilion. The Miller residence. I just put up a little website with some of my early sketches. You know, the ones with my name on them, and the original design files. The metadata is fascinating, isn't it? It's amazing what a digital footprint can prove." My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Clara, no. This is a joke. Tell me this is a joke." "For 17 years, my life has been a joke," I replied, my voice still unnervingly calm. "I'm just delivering the punchline." Leo's face, which had been pale with shock, was now turning a blotchy red. "You are trying to ruin me," he seethed, slamming the trophy down on the table. It made a loud thud that caused nearby guests to turn and stare openly. "Tonight! You chose tonight to ruin everything?" "Ruin what, Leo?" I asked a genuine question. "Your reputation, or the lie we've all been living. You didn't design that building. You don't have a visionary bone in your body. You're a salesman. A very, very good one. But you're not an architect. You're just the face of my work." "How dare you?" My father finally spoke, his voice a low growl. He stood up, towering over me. His public composure was cracking, revealing the raw anger beneath. "After everything we have given you, this family, this firm, it gave you a place. It gave you security. And you repay us with this? This betrayal? You are destroying the Vance name." "No," I said, standing up to face him. I was shorter than him, but for the first time, I didn't feel small. "I'm claiming my own. The Vance name you care about is built on my work, my mind, my talent. You just put Leo's picture on the cover. You talk about the firm like it's a sacred institution. It's not. It's a business that has been exploiting my talent and my silence for years. And I'm done being silent. A woman from a rival firm, someone I recognized but had never spoken to, walked slowly towards our table. She was holding her phone, her expression a mixture of shock and something that looked like dawning comprehension. "Clara?" she said, her voice hesitant. Is this true? The Serenity Chapel design? That was you." I looked at her and nodded. "Yes, Julia. That was me." Leo looked like he had been physically struck. The Serenity Chapel was one of his first solo projects, the one that had won him the Young Innovators Grant, the one I designed in my dorm room. The confrontation wasn't loud or hysterical. It was something worse. It was a quiet, public dissection. The foundations of our family were being exposed, layer by layer, under the bright, unforgiving lights of the Astoria Ballroom, in front of everyone who mattered in our world. My mother started to cry. Not loud sobs, but the quiet, dignified tears of a woman whose carefully constructed world was crumbling. "Think of what this will do to us," she pleaded, looking at me. "Think of the family." "I have," I said, my voice softening for a moment. "I have thought of nothing but the family my entire life. I have sacrificed my name, my career, my own sense of self for the family. And what did it get me? A seat at a table where I get to watch my own soul's work be celebrated as his. The family you're talking about is a fiction. It's a hierarchy designed to serve one person, and I'm opting out." I picked up my clutch from the table. I looked at Leo, whose face was a storm of rage and humiliation. I looked at my father, whose expression had hardened into cold, unforgiving fury. And I looked at my mother, who just looked broken. There was no love in their eyes for me, only shock and betrayal. They weren't mourning the injustice I had suffered. They were mourning the destruction of their perfect narrative. "I'm leaving," I said simply. I turned and walked away from the table, away from the trophy, away from the family that had been my whole world. I could feel hundreds of pairs of eyes on me. I didn't look back. As I walked through the grand lobby, my phone, which had been silent in my bag, began to vibrate. It didn't stop. It buzzed and buzzed and buzzed, a frantic, insistent signal that the world I had just upended was trying to get in touch. The aftermath was a tsunami. I didn't go home. I went to a hotel I had booked under a different name, a small anonymous place across town. I turned off my phone, but not before I saw the flood of notifications. Hundreds of emails, dozens of texts, missed calls from my parents, from Leo, from numbers I didn't recognize. The website I had launched had a traffic analytics plugin. In the first hour, it had over 50,000 unique visitors. The link was being shared on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on private architect forums. The story was out, and it was spreading faster than I could have imagined. The next morning, it was everywhere. The industry blogs were the first to pick it up. "Scandal at the NGA Awards. Leo Vance's win questioned as sister claims credit for decades of work." They had screenshots of my designs next to the official firm photos. They had quotes from anonymous sources within my own firm. "We always wondered," one junior designer was quoted as saying, "Clara was the quiet one, but whenever you had a real design problem, she was the one you went to." Leo just approved things. By noon, it had hit the mainstream media. Forbes, the New York Times, Bloomberg. They were more cautious, but the story was too juicy to ignore. Vance Architecture in crisis, amidst allegations of fraud and plagiarism. They were digging. Journalists were parked outside the firm's headquarters, outside my parents' home, outside my apartment. My carefully planned digital detonation had turned into a full-blown media firestorm. My brother, my parents, they didn't release a statement for 2 days. 2 days of complete damning silence. I later learned this was because they were in crisis mode, huddled with a team of high-priced lawyers and PR consultants, trying to figure out how to spin a story that was backed by years of digital evidence. When their statement finally came, it was a masterpiece of corporate deflection. It spoke of a deeply saddened family, a troubled and confused sister, and a misunderstanding over the collaborative nature of creative work. They painted me as unstable, emotional, jealous of my brother's success. They tried to frame my meticulously documented portfolio as a misguided cry for help. It was a classic gaslighting strategy, an attempt to discredit the messenger because they couldn't discredit the message. But it was too late. I wasn't an anonymous source. I was a named author, with a mountain of proof. The consequences for the firm were swift and brutal. The Helios Building's primary investor, a massive international conglomerate, announced they were launching an internal investigation into the authorship and integrity of the project. 2 major clients, whose projects were in my secret portfolio, immediately put their multi-million-dollar contracts on hold. The firm's stock, which was privately held but had a public valuation, plummeted. The Vance name, once a symbol of prestige, was now a symbol of scandal. The personal fallout was even more profound. My mother left me a voicemail. It was 10 minutes long. She didn't yell. She cried. She talked about my childhood, about how they had given me everything, about how my actions were tearing her heart out. She accused me of being cruel, selfish, and ungrateful. She never once, in those 10 minutes, acknowledged the possibility that what I had claimed was true. She ended the call by saying, "You are no longer my daughter." My father was more direct. He sent a single, curt email from his lawyer. It was a cease and desist order, demanding I take down the website immediately, citing defamation and breach of a non-disclosure agreement I had supposedly signed when I joined the firm. An agreement I had never seen and certainly never signed. It was a threat, a legal scare tactic. I forwarded it to the pro bono lawyer from a women's advocacy group who had agreed to represent me. Leo didn't contact me at all. He just disappeared from public view. He deleted his social media. He resigned from the boards he sat on. The Architect of the Year award was officially put under review by the Guild. His brilliant, shining career had been extinguished overnight. I was alone, but I wasn't. Emails poured in from all over the world. Young architects, especially women, wrote to me with their own stories of being pushed aside, of having their ideas stolen by male colleagues, of being told to be a team player, while others took the credit. An old professor of mine wrote, "Clara, I always knew. I saw it in your student work. I have been waiting for the world to see it, too." A few former employees from Vance Architecture reached out, offering to testify on my behalf if needed. They sent me old emails and project notes that further substantiated my claims. I was an outcast from my own family, but I had found a different kind of community. The open-endedness of it all was terrifying and liberating. The firm was in shambles. My family had disowned me. I had no job and was living off my savings in a sterile hotel room. But for the first time in my adult life, I felt free. The weight of the secret, the burden of the lie, was gone. The silence had been broken, and the noise was deafening, but at least it was honest. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if I'd ever design another building, if I'd win the legal battles, if the gaping wound in my family would ever heal. But as I looked out of the hotel window at the city skyline, at the tops of buildings, someone, somewhere, had dreamed up. I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. I had a name again, and it was my own. For a long time, I believed that peace was the ultimate goal. Keeping the peace in my family was my primary function. I thought that sacrificing my own needs, my own voice, for the sake of harmony was a noble act. I thought love meant making yourself smaller so that someone else could feel bigger. I was wrong. Peace at any cost isn't peace at all. It's a slow-acting poison. It's the erosion of your own soul, one silent compromise at a time. The biggest lesson I learned from this whole implosion wasn't about architecture or business. It was about the nature of boundaries. I spent my entire life without them. My family operated like a single organism, and any attempt to define where I ended, and they began, was treated as a sickness, a rejection of the whole. When my father told me not to rock the boat, he was telling me that my personal stability was less important than the stability of the collective delusion. When my mother asked me to let Leo use my drawing, she was teaching me that my creative output was a communal resource to be deployed for the greater good, which always somehow meant Leo's good. Setting that final explosive boundary, publishing my work, was the most painful and terrifying thing I have ever done. It felt like severing a limb. And in many ways, it was. I lost my family. I lost the world I knew. The immediate aftermath was brutal. There were days I'd sit in that hotel room and just stare at the wall, overwhelmed by the grief and the shock. But here's the secret they don't tell you about setting a boundary you should have set years ago. The pain is acute, but the relief is profound. The agony of the confrontation is temporary. The agony of living without a self is permanent. I had chosen temporary, searing pain over a permanent, quiet death. I also learned that you cannot make people see a truth they are determined to ignore. I held on to a sliver of hope that when presented with irrefutable proof, my parents would have a moment of clarity, that they would see the injustice and say, "My God, Clara, we are so sorry. We were so blind." That never happened. Their identities were too intertwined with the myth of Leo's genius. To admit I was the architect was to admit that their entire family structure was a lie, that their judgment was flawed, and that they had been complicit in a massive injustice against their own daughter. It was easier for them to label me a traitor than to reconstruct their entire reality. People will often choose the story that makes them feel better over the one that is true. And that might be the most important lesson of all. You can't wait for validation from the people who are benefiting from your silence. You have to be your own validator. For years, I was waiting for my father to finally say, "You did this, and it's brilliant." I was waiting for my brother to say, "Thank you. I couldn't have done it without you." I was waiting for my mother to see me. That validation was never going to come. The only person who could give me my voice back was me. The moment I hit publish wasn't about destroying them. It was about validating myself. It was a declaration to the world and to myself that I exist. My work matters, and I will no longer be invisible. The healing began when I stopped needing their permission to be proud of myself. So what now? The legal battles are ongoing, but the court of public opinion has already delivered its verdict. Several high-profile firms have reached out to me, not just with job offers, but with partnership opportunities. They don't want me as a ghost designer. They want Clara Vance. They want my name on the door. It's a strange, wonderful feeling. I'm starting small, taking on some freelance consulting work, finding my footing again. I'm designing a small community library in a town I'd never heard of. It's not a skyscraper. It won't win any glamorous awards. But it's mine. Every line, every window, every choice. And that feels bigger than any trophy. My story isn't a simple story of triumph. It's a messy, painful story of emancipation. I have my name back, but I carry the scars of how I lost it. I have a future, but it's one I have to build from the rubble of my past. It's a lonelier life in some ways, but it's an honest one. And I'm learning that honest loneliness is infinitely better than belonging to a beautiful lie. I guess what I really want to know is, what do you do when the people who are supposed to build you up are the ones holding you down? It took me 17 years to answer that question for myself, and I still wonder if I waited too long, or if I did the only thing I could. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Your stories and perspectives mean a lot, and if you want to follow along as I rebuild, and hear more stories about finding your voice, please hit that subscribe button. Thank you for listening.